Okay, so these are the toss-ups over artists and works, the entries numbers 111 through 128 in the list covering the study guide. So let's go ahead and begin. Toss-up number 1. The Tree of Life is located on the charity portico of this structure, where turtles and tortoises are located at the bases of some columns. Josep Maria Subarax oversaw the sculpture of this structure's Passion facade, and this structure's construction was directed by Dominic Sugranes after the death of the original architect. The 18 spires for this structure are meant to represent the holy figures from the Bible, although several have not yet been constructed. For 10 points, name this Barcelona church slated for completion in 2026, originally designed by Antoni Gaudi, and that is the Sagrada Familia. Toss-up number 2. This artist depicted a worried couple in an isolated car in California in Ditched, Stalled, and Stranded. This artist portrayed members of the Mochida family awaiting evacuation after being commissioned by the War Relocation Authority to cover Japanese-American internment at Manzanar. Another work by this artist depicts the backs of several hat-wearing men while one leans over a fence with an empty cup. That work is White Angel Breadline. This artist's most famous work features a black and white Florence Owens Thompson looking anxiously as her children surround her amid the Great Depression. For 10 points, name this photographer of Migrant Mother, and that is Dorothea Lange. Toss-up number 3. Because of a design alteration, this structure's third floor passage leads nowhere and is now a sleeping alcove. A stepped semicircular canopy connects its main house to its guest house. Living room illumination comes from overhead trellis beams, while another set of trellis beams hang over the structure's entrance. The corner windows run directly into the stonework, while broad bands of red-framed windows fold out onto balconies. Deflection of its concrete cantilevers and mold damage has led to its owner dubbing it Rising Mildew. For 10 points, name this Pennsylvania house situated over a waterfall designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. And that is, of course, Falling Water. Toss-up number 4. Nerostra steel was used for the cladding on this building's crown, topped by a secretly constructed spire that allowed it to briefly become the world's tallest building. Gargoyles modeled after hood ornaments adorned, for 10 points, what Art Deco New York skyscraper named for a car company, and that is the Chrysler Building. Toss-up number 5. With Mary Hunter Austin, this artist compiled much of his work at New Mexico into a book that features a piece with crosses resting atop mud dwellings. In that book, Taos Pueblo, this artist used the technique he developed with Fred Archer that creates 11 different levels of exposure, known as the zone system. This man, who took photos of young Japanese children saluting at the Manzanar internment camp, co-founded F-Stop 64 with other photographers. For 10 points, name this American photographer who took Moon over Half Dome and several other photos at Yosemite, and that is Ansel Adams. Toss-up 6. This man's design for the League of Nations building in Geneva was rejected because he did not write it in Indian ink. Dr. Pedro Curuchet commissioned this architect to design his house in La Plata, Argentina. This man and Oscar Niemeyer co-designed the headquarters of the United Nations. His designs often included open-hand statues, the biggest part of which is in Chandigarh, India, a city that he planned. This man's frequent use of pilotis is part of his 5 points of architecture laid out in his Towards a New Architecture. For 10 points, name this Swiss-French architect who designed the Via Savoy, and that is Le Corbusier. Toss-up 7. This structure experiences only compression with no shear and is therefore an inverted catenary curve. It is made from a series of tapering equilateral triangles, and visitors can ride in a sloping tram system to its top. This largest building in the Jefferson National Expansion Memorial was designed by Eero Saarinen. For 10 points, name this large curved structure located in St. Louis, Missouri, and that is the Gateway Arch. Toss-up number 8. A black man sits on a log in this artist's portrait of John Henry, which is titled A Well-Remembered Servant. This student of Samuel Morse began making imperial-sized portraits with ambrotype after earning first prize at the Crystal Palace exhibition. Another of this artist's portraits shows his beardless subject standing next to a column on the day that the subject gave the Cooper Union speech. This artist stands next to a tree to the right of the title figures in his General Robert Potter and staff. Men such as Millard Fillmore were included in his Gallery of Illustrious Americans. He exhibited works made by Alexander Gardner and James Gibson, including one of a mass of dead bodies lying next to a fence at Antietam. For 10 points, name this Civil War photographer. That is Matthew Brady. Toss-up number 9. The design for this building was inspired by John Jacob Rascob standing on a pencil on end. In 1945, B-25 bomber crashed into this building, and this building's roof only saw one instance of its intended use as a Zeppelin dock. This William Lamb-designed building features floodlights, which were darkened to commemorate Fay Ray's death, and it bested the nearby Chrysler building in a competition for tallest in the world. For 10 points, identify this iconic skyscraper in Manhattan. And that is the Empire State Building. Toss-up number 10. This building sculpture by Pigalle honors a Harcourt count and shows death holding an hourglass over a figure in a coffin. The signs of the zodiac appear in its west, one of its 3 rose windows. A 1723 Pietà statue by Nicolas Cousteau adorns one of the altars in this building, whose architects included Jean de Chelles. By one account, its cornerstone was laid by Bishop Maurice de Sully in 1163. For 10 points, name this example of Gothic architecture, a cathedral on a Paris island. And that is Notre Dame de Paris. Notre Dame. Toss-up 11. This man designed a building at the Illinois Institute of Technology, the S.R. Crown Hall. A pair of this man's works generated controversy due to their non-functional mullions. This architect of the Lakeshore Drive Towers also designed an iconic chair for his Barcelona pavilion at the 1929 International Exhibition. Another one of his works rests on 5-foot stilts and features walls comprised almost entirely of glass. This architect of the Farnsworth House designed a building containing the Four Seasons restaurant in his characteristic international style, the Seagram Building. For 10 points, name this last director of the Bauhaus School, known for its epigrams such as "Less is more." And that is Mies van der Rohe. Toss-up 12. One of this artist's work contrasts the old and new of a city by showing traditional houses in the foreground and a skyscraper under construction in the background, while an abstract series by this artist entitled Equivalence depicts clouds. Another work by this artist depicts a horse-drawn carriage making its way through the snow on the title street, Fifth Avenue. This man founded the journal Camera Work as well as the Gallery 291. This photographer's most famous piece appears to be inspired by Cubism and depicts lower-class passengers on a steamship. For 10 points, name this American photographer of the steerage who started the photo-secessionist movement and took many photographs of his wife, Georgia O'Keeffe. And that is Alfred Stieglitz. Toss-up number 13. This man made models for a garden city called Broadacre City. This architect designed a hypostyle hall for a building whose core was designed in a taproot style. One of this designer's buildings is inspired by Mayan architecture and is called Hollyhock House. This architect of the S.C. Johnson Research Tower designed a building that consists of a single spiraling ramp and serves as an art museum. Due to its floating foundation, one of this man's buildings survived a major earthquake in Tokyo. A building this architect designed for Edgar Kaufman used cantilever design to stand over a Pennsylvania waterfall. For 10 points, name the Prairie School architect of the Imperial Hotel and Falling Water. And that is Frank Lloyd Wright. Toss-up 14. A map designed by Harry Beck for this city uses only horizontal, vertical, and 45-degree lines. Though Norman Foster designed the never-built Millennium Tower in this city, he did eventually design a replacement with a tapering ellipsoid shape nicknamed for its resemblance to a certain pickled vegetable. A derogatory comment about how a building would pierce the heart of this home of the gherkin inspired that Renzo Piano design building's common name, the Shard. The Charing Cross Bridge in this city can be seen from the top of Europe's tallest Ferris wheel, its namesake eye. For 10 points, name this home of Big Ben. And that is London. Toss-up 15. In William Gibson's The Gernsback Continuum, this term is combined with the word raygun to describe an Art Deco-inspired retro-futuristic style. In England, the latest period of this style emphasized vertically and was thus named perpendicular. Examining window tracery can help distinguish between its rayonnant and flamboyant periods. Many buildings in this style were controversially restored by Eugene Viollet-le-Duc, who spearheaded its 19th century revival. Several elements of this style's predecessor, the Romanesque, survive in the Chartres Cathedral, which is otherwise in this style. Ribbed vaults, pointed arches, and flying buttresses characterize, for 10 points, what style of medieval architecture exemplified by towering cathedrals such as Notre Dame de Paris, and that is the Gothic. A toss-up number 16 of 23. I think. A rhomboid, dome, and tilted cone clad in aluminum constitute this architect's design for the Macau Science Center. This architect was inspired by the Ibn Tulun Mosque to design a museum of Islamic art in Doha, while a research center designed by this architect in Colorado was inspired by Anasazi cliff dwellings. This architect of Mesa Laboratory received heavy criticism for a project whose main structure resembles the entrance to this architect's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That design by this man includes a glass-covered entrance to the Parisian art museum it sits in front of. For 10 points, name this architect of the Louvre Pyramid who died in 2019. And that is I.M. Pei. Toss-up number 17. Toss-up number 17. One building designed by this architect has ventilation towers made to look like faces and has central atrium open to the sky. One of his works contains a large undulating bench, and near the entrance of that work sits a large mosaic lizard. His most famous work depicts the life of Jesus on the facades, and its 18 bell towers depict Jesus, Mary, the evangelists, and the apostles. That church is projected to be finished in 2025. For 10 points, name the Spanish architect of the Sagrada Familia. And that is Gaudi. Toss-up number 18. One building by this architect was designed as a hotel and an office block wrapped around an opera theater and had a 17-story tower. Another of his buildings is similar to an earlier edifice, except that its facade has ornamental terracotta instead of bare brick rectangular columns. This architect and his partner designed the Auditorium building in Chicago and Buffalo's Guarantee building. He also made a building with a 2-story sandstone base below a brick facade with an overhanging terracotta cornice. That building has a frame made entirely of steel. For 10 points, name this collaborator of Dankmar Adler, who designed early skyscrapers such as St. Louis's Wainwright building. And that would be Sullivan. Toss-up number 19. One of the men depicted would die 10 years later on the Gila River Indian Reservation after drinking himself to death. The event that it depicts was ordered by Chandler Johnson, and the difficulty in carrying out this event caused Rene Gagnon and John Bradley to come to the aid of the original group. Robert Denig attempted to learn the identities of the men depicted, and Gagnon initially refused to name Ira Hayes. Used by the Treasury Department to raise over $200 million, this work was used by Felix de Weldon as the model for a sculpture near Arlington National Cemetery. For 10 points, name this Joe Rosenthal photograph that shows 6 U.S. military personnel atop Mount Suribachi in 1945. And that is raising the flag over Iwo Jima. Toss-up number 20. According to Business Insider, a school of management building designed by this man was designated the second ugliest building in Ohio behind the Longaberger basket. This former Los Angeles truck driver tried both chemical engineering and radio announcing before settling on architecture. A design by this man that depicts the plains of Kansas was chosen for the Dwight D. Eisenhower Memorial in D.C. This man was sued after a water leakage occurred in his Santa Center at MIT, or Stata Center at MIT. He created a building which evokes imagery of 2 moving people called Dancing House. For 10 points, name this Canadian-born architect famous for his Experience Music project in Seattle, Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles, and Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain. And that is Frank Gehry. Toss-up number 21. There are only 21. I was wrong on 23. This man employed a double curve form and a reinforced concrete arch in his design of the Ingles Ice Rink at the campus of Yale University. He designed Knoll's first major hit product, sometimes called Pedestal. This architect's thin-shell concrete buildings include the Kresge Auditorium at MIT. He created the headquarters of CBS, John Deere, IBM, and GM. He created the main terminal of Dulles and the TWA Flight Center at JFK. He is best known for an inverse catenary-shaped structure representing westward expansion in the United States. For 10 points, name this Finnish-American architect who designed the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, and that is Eero Saarinen. And that's it. Other items that are in that list, you obviously might not see it tossed up at the high school level, but they do appear in bonuses, especially skyscrapers from the for which there is a you gotta know from NQT, Gothic cathedrals, as well as other things as well. But keep studying and keep learning. Thanks.